I'm traveling actually, so I'm in Paris right now. We have a team retreat in Turkey, so I'm usually based in Miami and have a reasonable setup there. So if there's any echo or anything, let me know and I can try to dial it in a little bit.
Yeah, appreciate that. No worries. Sounds good on our end. So I'm Colin, and then this is Tim.
Pleasure to meet you.
Cool. Yeah, likewise. Excited to chat and good to meet you.
Yeah. Appreciate you taking the time, man. So you're in Paris right now.
That's exactly correct.
Okay. We're doing things wrong because we're in the Midwest. We're in Indianapolis, and it's humid as all get out. So
Hey, I was just in Miami and the Bahamas actually, so I like the dryness, but I think humidity is nice. Some people give it a lot of hate, but it feels like the world is hugging you every time you leave your house.
It's true.
As long as you have AC, it's not a bad thing.
man,
Good way to put it.
If you don't have AC, then that's just impossible to deal with.
yeah, that's fair. But man, I don't know. I guess I don't know. I would like a little change. I'd like a little drier. Everyone's like, "Oh, is it like the dry heat like Arizona?" I was like, "I've never been to Arizona, so I couldn't tell you."
Yeah.
So, Paul, you said you had a team retreat in Paris. Do you guys always, is your team from all over the globe? Is it mostly stateside? Then you go overseas for cool retreats? How's that work?
Yeah, good question. So we started the company a little over a year ago, and we now have about 30 people full time, and we're all remote. So we started. I remember starting the company, and even with the core team, it was just when COVID started happening in LA, and so really couldn't meet, go to the office, do anything. So that forced us to adopt really remote first principles, and we were just like, hey, let's just work with people around the world. And it's been really awesome. So we have people in the US on all coasts. We have people in Europe, in Amsterdam, Latvia, Minsk, all around the Ukraine. And so we have two teams, one of them for archive communities, which is our influencer marketing community service, and one of them archive app, our pure software product. And so this quarter, we're doing a software retreat. We actually had to push it back a couple of times because travel restrictions just are crazy. And so we're really happy that we can finally do it. One of the interesting things about just having a remote team is that there's no G&A, there's no like office costs. And so you can just like fly everyone in a location and still pay way less. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. You get to meet people in real life and just see what people look like, you know, like when I don't know how tall you guys might be like 6'8". You might be like 2. I don't know. Who knows?
And if I were 6'8", I'd be.
I wish, man. I'd be in the league.
Yeah, right.
No, but you'd be surprised. One of my team members, Evgeny, when I met him for the first time, I was like, "Whoa, you're tall, dude." He's like 6'6", 6'8". I had no idea.
And the other way around, you meet someone they're especially short. You got to be careful about. Oh, whoa, you're so short. You got to be careful with that side of it.
Yeah.
You don't use those examples in Zoom calls, so
Yeah. But so for our audience, you talk about your company. Do you maybe just want to give a brief overview for our audience of like what your company does, what solutions you provide, and just go from there?
Yeah, for sure. So we have two products. In general, we came from an e-commerce background where we built software and e-commerce businesses successfully, and learned a lot through the process about how to grow, how to optimize your ads, how to build demand so that people could go to your website and get your products, whether that's SEO, Facebook ads. And so with Archive, we focused on taking a lot of those learnings and processes and building software and artificial intelligence to help streamline all of those initiatives to make it really easy for a brand owner or a digital marketing team to do their job and launch their campaigns in a really easy way. They don't have to worry about saving this and that and all of these processes. So we have two products. Our first product is called Archive App. It's a really, really simple app on Shopify. You install it, you connect your Facebook and Instagram account, and it will automatically save and label all of the stories that you get tagged in. So if you've got a brand that consumers are sharing, or you're working with influencers and they're posting in stories, those stories disappear within 24 hours. And so some people like have to check in every day. And even when they're on vacation or on the weekend, they'll have to check into Instagram to save that really valuable content. Mm-hmm. So we have an app that will automatically save that for you, put it in one place, and make it really easy to find. So that's a starting point for us. And eventually we're going to let brands use these assets in different ways. And then our second product is called Archive Communities. It's our take on influencer marketing. So we've built a ton of software and have a database of over 100 million influencers. And that lets us, what we call is build nano influencer communities for brands. So instead of having a brand and paying 50 influencers $1,000 each, or 50 influencers $10,000 each to do a couple of posts, which is not super authentic, doesn't have like really good long-term benefits for your brand, we'll find a community of influencers for your brand and use our software to build relationships with them, find influencers, and activate a large number of them. And again, it's like instead of working with 50 big influencers, we can work with 1,000 small influencers and drive a lot more content, a lot more impact. And the cool thing is that because there's so many things happening, it becomes a lot more data driven. If you're working with 10 influencers and 4 don't perform, you're kind of screwed. Like what learning you're going to get, it's kind of chance. But if you're working with 500 or 1,000 and you have a really rigorous process for tracking engagement and performance, you can learn and optimize your community over time. So those are 2 different products. And again, it's really, really focused on e-commerce companies because that's what we have experience in, and that's what we've been building software for.
Okay, that's really cool how you're doing that. I mean, do you have I did talk about e-commerce companies. Do you have like a niche that you're doing within e-commerce, or do you kind of serve all types of e-commerce businesses?
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting. E-commerce means a lot of things to different people. We really focus on direct to consumer brands and essentially brands that have products that people are excited to try. Why? Because our special sauce is gifting, and when you're gifting influencers, it's a magical kind of like new type of relationship where it's kind of like quid pro quo. You're like, hey, would love for you to try this product. Maybe it's a t-shirt, maybe it's a cap, maybe it's a mic, could be anything. The influencer tries it and they really like it. Maybe they want more of it, or they're excited to support the brand, so they'll share and use their audience. You can't really do that with, a digital product and things like that. So we specialize a lot more in these physical products that people can experience. With Archive app, we are focused on Shopify for now. And so I would say our niche is Shopify brands, but it doesn't matter if it's fashion, hardware, gardening. It could really be anything.
That's crazy. And I feel like e-commerce, I mean, for the last few years, but now people are catching on, like e-commerce is the thing where it's so big. That's the business model. And you mentioned authenticity. So to stay authentic with your products, your people, do you do a lot of research on, here's our product, let's find some influencers who might be drawn to that? Or is it kind of, let's capture this many influencers as much as we can, see if they like it? What's kind of the order of operations there?
Yeah, so it's both. When we work with brands, with archive communities, and a brand comes to us and like, hey, Paul, here's our goal. We want to increase sales, or we want to increase brand awareness, or we want content. And we're excited to build a community of influencers to support that. We start off by really understanding their personas, who they're targeting. And in order to build a community, we think of it as a community as a number of groups of influencers. We call them influencer buckets. So one of them might be, if you're, let's call it a health company, we work with a big Four Sigmatic, for example, a big health direct consumer brand. They're crushing it. They might launch a new product and they might have fitness hardcore people. They might have like casual moms. They might have like yoga influencers. And so we come up with a couple of different theses for the types of influencers that would be a really good fit for the brand. Because it's interesting because when we're looking for influencers, we have to set some targeting parameters, because we can't just do fitness people for everyone. That's what a lot of platforms that you do. And you run out of those influencers because everyone's already working with the 10 fitness influencers. So we have to be a little bit more specific. And so we come up with these mini personas, and we want to find influencers or personas of influencers that will influence your final persona, which is your customer persona. And so we kind of think of like, okay, who's not necessarily, we're not going to target our customers on Instagram because they might not be all influencers, but we're going to find influencers that maybe have a 20 or 40 or 50 or 70% overlap with our customer demo. And then we'll look at the community over time. We want it to be really diverse. And so we'll be like, hey, like, are dudes crushing it compared to girls? Are these golfer dads just making it rain compared to like these that we'd expect? Sometimes that is the case because different niches will have different level of competitiveness, right? So for example, if you're working beauty influencers, every beauty company is doing influencer marketing. And so those influencers are going to be a lot harder to get to. Whereas if you have maybe a, what's another, like a yoga mom or something that maybe isn't as targeted, a lot of her followers care about beauty and it will be an authentic story. And so that might perform well. One of the interesting things with the smaller influencers, and we really focus on nano influencers, is that with influencers, there's kind of like 2 types of influence. If you follow a professional athlete or maybe like the world's greatest food blogger, you follow him not because you really relate to him or you know him, but because he knows a lot about food or knows a lot about his industry. And so you have this kind of like practical influence on a subject matter. With nano influencers, it's like if I'll follow you on Instagram after, right? And if you post something about shoes or a hat or a fishing rod, it doesn't really matter whether you're an expert or not. We have this relationship. I developed this bond and this care about your opinion. And so I'll be interested. And if I'm interested in fishing rods and you talk about a fishing rod, even though you're not a fishing rod expert, I'd be like, oh, my friend cares about that. It's probably a cool brand. I'll check him out. So that's kind of like really the dynamic that we go after.
That's cool.
Gotcha. And then these softwares, you said two softwares. How'd you come up with this proof of concept? Was this something you developed yourself? Was this something you collaborated with someone on? I know you said you have a team, but like, do you want to walk us through like the inception of it, like how it came to fruition and how you went about developing it?
For sure. And I can tell you the full story because one, I guess, piece of software led to the second one too.
Okay.
So when we were the company that I ran e-commerce for, was on the founding team for, was called HVMN, Healthy and Modern Nutrition. We create products. We have a keto food bar that's really delicious, and a bunch of health products that help people with performance. A lot of new products in the keto space. One of the things that we were doing was trying to grow and do influencer marketing. We did these big paid influencer programs, and we paid this big influencer $10,000. And one time he drove $30,000 of sales. We're like, cool, this is great. Let's do it again. And then the second video, he generated like $2,000. We're just like, what? Like, what happened? And so we're like, wow, this is like really spiky. Like, how do we do influencer marketing properly? And a lot of my friends at companies like Halo Top, at companies like MVMT, were running these gifting programs and these communities of influencers. So what they were doing, in addition of doing these big paid campaigns, is they would give product. Some people call it seeding. Some people call it gifting products to 1,000 people. And they would hire people in-house. They would have like 8 full-time team members just managing Google Sheets. And you're like, okay, cool, let's do that. Let's accept we're not like, we don't have that much cash. We don't want to hire like 8 people in LA to do this. Let's maybe, work with some virtual assistants and Google Sheets and try to automate all of that. And so that's what we did. And it started off with Google Sheets at HVMN. And then when I was thinking about starting a new company, I was really excited about e-commerce. And I was actually looking to, Jeff and I were talking to companies about building specifically like Shopify apps for like Facebook ad targeting and things like that. But a lot of my friends were like, hey, actually, can you just like, we'll pay you not for the apps, but for this gifting program you're running at HVMN. Can you do the same thing for us? And we're like, oh, yeah, sure. Let's do that to bootstrap the company. And that led us to iteratively building a better and better program. We started off by adding automation, like, using Airtable and different scripts. We used different kind of like mail merge and tracking. And then we started gathering data. We started scraping Instagram just because we run out of influencers you could easily find. And so it went from a Google Sheet to kind of this Airtable system to having our engineers replace each component one at a time. So for example, sourcing influencers was super manual. We used to spend like 10 hours to find 200 influencers. And then we built a bunch of software that could find influencers. We redesigned Instagram's UI so we can quickly like flick through influencers and see the relevant thing, remove bad influencers, and that cut it down to 1 hour. And so we kind of like built different chunks of the system. And now we have a full-fledged platform that we run internally. And that's kind of like how it led to that. So that's with Archive Communities, this platform that we have that helps brands curate communities and work with thousands of influencers in a really seamless way. Now with Archive App, that came through Archive Communities. We were working with companies and generating thousands of user-generated content and posts on Instagram. And our team was manually saving these posts. And we had like weekend shifts for people to save this content. And it was a lot of work. And we're like, hey, let's automate that. That's kind of like not a great thing to do on the weekend, is to just go check your inbox and save it. And we see all these brands doing it themselves internally. For example, one company we work with, they have 3 full-time interns saving content from Instagram manually into Google Drive. And I have a software background, so I'm like, yeah, this is dumb. Like, we got to like, so we automated it. And when we did that for Archive Communities, we realized that not only did our Archive Communities customers need this, but like all e-commerce brands need to save their Instagram content. It disappears for everyone, not just us. And so that led to Archive App, where we took a segment of our Archive Communities stack and focus it as its own kind of like self-serve app that anyone can use. Archive communities is on the pricier side of things. We typically start off at 10K a month retainers, and we try to scale communities. So we go from maybe 150 influencers a month to 1,000 and work with larger brands. And so we had a lot of smaller brands that were like, hey, this is really cool. I want to save this content. I don't want to like sit in the bathroom on Sunday and like screenshot my stories and then send them to Slack or Google Drive. So that's how we build the tech and really came across Archive app as its own product.
Yeah, that's amazing. So that, and I feel like you explain that in a really clear way too, a very complex concept in a clear way. So I appreciate you explaining that. So is this is just for Instagram and Facebook?
This is just for Instagram right now, and we will be expanding for different services. Our philosophy in terms of creating products is we want to get to market really, really quickly. We want to launch with something that's like embarrassing and then iterate from there. We want to build a really, really differentiated solution for the biggest problem for some customers, and then we can expand. So we want to have a really, really bulletproof program on Instagram compared to TikTok. Because when you're building software, if you have to do TikTok and YouTube and Instagram, it's actually going to be like 10 times slower than just building for Instagram. And so we want to kind of build really, really focused first. Obviously, in the future, we'll expand to other services, and we already have plans and things in motion for that. But right now, we're really focused on Instagram. We also, it's actually interesting. One of the reasons we started on Instagram is because of the nature of influencers on Instagram. Yeah. If you're running a program on TikTok and you're activating influencers, it's very unpredictable. Why? Because there's this huge virality engine, right? Like you see these stories of small influencers that have 5,000 followers going viral and getting 1 million views. That doesn't really happen on Instagram. People don't go viral on Instagram as much. However, on Instagram with stories, you get predictable views, right? You can post a terrible story and a great story, and they'll get similar engagement in terms of views. So when you're a company and you're building a community, if you're stacking up these small pieces and small dominoes with all these small influencers and they're posting on the regular, you can get very, very consistent results by working with a large set of influencers on Instagram. On TikTok, the strategy would be a little bit different. I'd focus on being really creative, working really closely with specific influencers, as opposed to kind of doing this community building approach where you're working with a large amount of influencers and gifting them every month.
Yeah, that makes sense. And do you think that that's the case because TikTok, they've done a good job of like having the deep learning aspect and being able to like use data to curate the content that people want, where that's probably why it makes it so unpredictable, right?
Exactly. I think TikTok just built a great product and it solved a lot of the problems that people had with Instagram, and Instagram's doing Reels to try to replicate that for their own, their own customers. It's kind of like really interesting. TikTok got really good at understanding, using deep learning to understand what content is. And now that they actually understand what content is, they can use that information to predict like what you're going to like and what you're going to watch. And when you use the For You page on TikTok, you're going to see, I don't know what the percentage is, but a lot of the content is going to be people you don't follow. On Instagram, you really are following people you are following and seeing content of people you follow. So it's a very different dynamic.
Definitely. That makes sense. And then I'm also curious, like when you bring on a new client to use your product, what does the onboarding process look like of installing your software for them? And then how involved do you stay after that with the company?
Yeah, good question. So I'll answer for both. With Archive app, it's actually super easy to install. We technically don't even need to do anything. You could just sign up manually. However, we are taking a hands-on approach because we're still in an early stage and want to get a lot of feedback from customers. So we have a wait list and we'll pick customers on our wait list and onboard them at a certain time during the week. We'll have myself, Sergey, who leads design for Archive app, and Evgeny, one of our head of engineering, will be on the call, and we'll onboard the customer, the three of us. And we have a survey to understand the type of e-commerce company they are, the type of marketing they do, the type of channels they focus on. Do they do a lot of Facebook ads, Instagram ads? Who works in marketing at that company? Do they have like one person or 5 people? Because we really want to understand that customer and start to see like, hey, is our app right now resonating really well with the bigger companies or the smaller companies, with the fashion companies or the watch companies? Maybe it's for any type of company, but that is also doing Facebook ads. And we're hand-holding people through the process so we can maximize learning. This is in early stages of building the product. And I think that's really important. We're learning a lot because we want to, our product is an ever evolving product, right? Like what we're thinking about is not like, hey, like let's make some money off the current product. It's, hey, like let's figure out what we need to build over the next 6 months so our product is actually like 10 times better. I think we're very ambitious with the roadmap that we want to do with Archive app. First, we're collecting stories. We want to make it super easy to save all of your content, pull in eventually TikTok, other things, also making it really easy to find content. And so understanding how people are searching for content is really important for us. So it's actually pretty hands-on and not self-serve yet. Eventually we'll be self-serve and we'll use tools like Intercom or things like that to design like a really good onboarding sequence. But for now, we're taking a really hands-on approach because we want to understand how customers are using the product, because, you know, I can't be the only one like thinking about features. We actually have to do it based on what people really need.
Right.
With Archive Communities, that looks a little bit more like a white glove tech-enabled agency platform right now. So we have a full-on onboarding process where we have a Google Doc, we have an onboarding team, we'll run people through a bunch of questions to understand their goals, et cetera, et cetera. And then we have essentially like a bunch of templates that we use in duplicate to kind of create like the email servers that we need, create like the influencer buckets, create the email templates that we do outreach for. And so that's like much more thorough. But again, one of the nice things about being hands-on and onboarding is really understanding like what the hell the customer wants so that you can just do a better job fulfilling, right?
Right.
I think like if you don't know what the company wants, how are you going to optimize the program for them?
Yeah, you can't, I mean, and the best, I mean, effective way to do that is to have like a human being interface with them and really make sure that they know that someone is understanding what they're saying. So yeah, that makes sense. How many employees did you say you had?
We have 30 right now.
30. Okay. And how distributed is it between the software team and the?
So we have 2 co-founders.
Okay.
We have a head of engineering and a VP of ops. And then we have 2 full-time designers, I think 8 full-time engineers. And so that's a software team.
Okay.
And then we have, I think the rest are split between different roles on the, what we call our program team. So these are really, really awesome marketers that help run our software for brands. So if a brand's like, hey, I want a community of 500 influencers, you know, there are influencer platforms they could use, but they have to hire someone and train someone to do it. And so the way that we work with brands is we have software that we know how to run really, really well. And so part of the, you know, software contract or service contract is that we'll actually have someone that is killer at influencer marketing to run this program for the brand. And then they're talking with the brand on a regular basis, email, Slack, calls, whatever, you know, whatever makes sense. And so we have quite a bit of those folks.
Okay, good.
And how has, from maybe last year to this year, or even the last couple of years with your marketing pandemic, since you're a lot of e-com virtual, have you had much changes in the way you've gone about your business, your software marketing, or has it kind of stayed consistent the last couple of years?
Yeah. So, I mean, we started the company literally when COVID started. So we just went head in. I think we do things very differently than previous companies I was involved in. From a marketing perspective, right now, we don't have any marketing. We're all referral driven. You know, really fortunate to just have a good network of people I've worked with in the past, and we have really good retention with our programs. And so people are constantly referring, you know, other brands, just because our offering is pretty unique in terms of the scale of influencers we can reach with this level of authenticity. In terms of company processes, it's a combination. So things have been changing all the time. I wouldn't say because of COVID. We just have been remote since day one, and a lot has to change as you go from 5-6 people to 30. And even with 30 people, I think that's something that we're very thoughtful about, right? The company is a machine, and there's a lot of things that you can work on. You can work on people, bringing in new people, improving people, coaching them. You can work on product, right? And having teams and systems to improve the product. You can also work on the company dynamics itself. So thinking about how to improve your culture, setting up systems like OKRs, really good one-on-ones and management, you know, training and things like that. So we're constantly evolving and constantly looking at different ways to improve how we run things.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit more about maybe the benefits, but also the challenges of having a fully remote team, people in different time zones, people in different areas of the country? How have you kind of, as a company, navigated that? And yeah. Can you speak more on
Yeah,
that?
I think that there's probably like a couple of big benefits. The first one is that you have access to talent around the world. And so if you have an amazing photography studio in Spain, like you can work with them because you don't have a rule that you will only have people that can walk into the office or commute within 1 hour. And so I used to live in San Francisco and Silicon Valley, and I spent time living in LA, and I live in Miami, and hubs of different things. And not all the best people for your business are going to be there. It's also really competitive to work in these hubs. There's a lot of people that are rotating jobs really often. And what we found is by working with people around the world, you can offer really differentiated opportunities, and you end up working with people that can be really, really loyal. And I think that's been like a really, really valuable thing. I think we have really good retention in terms of people on the team. And so a lot of the people that we started Archive with, I've been working with Jeff, for example, for 8 years, with Adam for like 3-4 years, with Kenny for 3-4 years. And so that's really something that is important because nothing compounds faster than people. If you're able to have really awesome people that can level up and grow, they get more ownership in the projects, your company gets bigger and they can work on more things, they get smarter or more equipped with different skills, and they have like more context and more trust. That's super, super powerful. The other thing is it forces you to adopt good, I would say, just company operations really quickly. If you're 8 people in a room in an office, like you don't really need, you can get away with like no notes, you can get away with no status updates with like light stuff. If you're 8 people in Slack around the world, you just need to document things. And so one of the things that we started doing was writing process docs. We have like over 150 or 200 process docs of the company. And we started doing that like early on, like when Adam and I were really early on at the company, we spent days where we just write like back to back, like 15-hour days, just like writing docs. And that's really helped us scale and grow. And that's just been part of the culture. Because again, if you're next to each other, you can be like, oh, let me just show you this thing real quick. But if you got to do a call and on Slack and on some other stuff, you're just like, wait, like we should just document it and you can read it. And then I'm here for questions, but we have a good foundation of documentation. And so I think just being fully remote forces you to adopt these practices that you typically can get away with in smaller companies. Some of the challenges is time zones, right? So we have people in the US. We have no one actually in the West Coast now. We all moved to Miami just because it was open and we were a little bit, you just wanted some change. Or not, anyway, for a number of reasons. Yeah. So we all moved to LA, so that's not all coast, but we have people in Europe and we have people in Asia. And so what we have set up is this working band. So everyone of the company is expected to be online from around I think like 9 a.m. PST to noon PST. That band changes sometimes, but we have 3 hours at least where we really expect everyone to be online. And so that's where our all hands is. That's where we have a meeting called Archive Social, where we all just hang out and sometimes we play poker, play different games, do breakout rooms and just do some casual water cooler chill stuff. And so that we have a band where everyone can collaborate, but we also have, asynchronous meetings and discussions so that if someone is doing something in one time zone, they're very, very productive and can get feedback when the person in another time zone is ready to work. I think that having that band is critical. Like we could not run the company without that band, right? And so it requires people in Asia and Europe to work later schedules, and it requires people in the US to work earlier schedules. And I think that's just part of what we communicate when we start the company or when we bring people onto the company.
Yeah, makes sense.
And I love how you said you and your partner just would write processes. That's something Tim and I, as of recently, we've started writing our own processes for our own businesses, and I hate it. Like I absolutely despise it. Like it's meticulous, like how to schedule an appointment for a new client or a patient. And it's like, open your phone. All right, step 2, like ask what days, but I think that's huge in terms of, because you scaled really fast, it seems like.
Yeah.
So to your point, integral, especially when you're not together, what are some other growing pains that maybe you might not have foreseen or what other people might not see from a business owner's perspective going as fast as you did? It's a good thing, but what are some other growing pains of scaling your business like that?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'll talk about first is a quick hack. If you hate process docs, some people love writing process docs. So that might be something that you can delegate. One thing you can do is just record yourself doing it. So at least there's like a reference. And it's not maybe a written process, but someone can just watch a video. So there's tools like Loom and stuff that you can do that. And then you can have the new person that is going to follow your process. You can be like, hey, your job is to document this video and write it up, right? And so you can do so in a scalable way. Again, if you hate doing it, you don't have to do it. I don't mind doing it. And also when I see the bigger picture, I'm like, yo, I'm excited to have a really big, awesome company and have people onboarded in a really chill way. So like, let's write this process doc. But you know, some people really just hate that kind of stuff, and there's ways around it. But so that's like a quick little tip. In terms of challenges, I think, I mean, one thing is that something that we saw in the engineering and design collaboration, where we went from just one team of, you know, 4 people that knew each other really well to now 2 teams of 4 to 5 people each on different products. Is we used to have like people just like DMing each other and just going on calls in Slack, and working on features in an undocumented way. And that just really, like, the last 3 months became painful. And so we're moving a lot of our process and have been moving to, again, async collaboration. When you're designing a feature, you're more thoughtful, maybe share a couple of videos to explain the context and then communicate in a public way. But I think breaking people's habits to just do work over DMs is a constant pain. And we're like, yo, do not talk about work in DMs, do it in a public channel, right? Because like other people might not care, but they might. And it's just better to have it in Slack and in a documented way. Another thing is management training. So one of the things that we're excited about is using our company as a platform to level people up and give people like really awesome career growth. And so we have people coming out of school, and in 6 months they have direct reports. And that's really awesome in some ways. And that's also challenging in some ways. And so management training, you know, Adam, Jeff, and I, and Evgeny, we've all been managers before we had that experience. So, and we study it, and we always try to get better at it and help each other. So we're, you know, on a higher level than someone just starting out. And so it was easy for us to bring in direct reports and have good structure there. But when you go from you managing individual contributors to managing managers who are then training their own managers, that's actually hard, because there's a lot of one-offs that happen or infrequent things that happen with a manager. Like, hey, this person's underperforming. Hey, this person has to go to maternity leave. Hey, this person is like having like a war with this other team member. There's ways to handle these things, but there's so many different things, and they don't come up that frequently, that we've actually found it pretty challenging to build up that framework. That's, I think, one of our biggest challenges. And then I think another thing is just managing like demand and capacity, right? So sometimes you have a lot of capacity, and then people are maybe a little bit more free. But most of the time you just you have too much demand and not enough capacity. And like, it's kind of like a constant battle between hiring more people and building software in demand. So that's like been a big challenge for us.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating how, you know, I wouldn't have thought of that, you know, from the DMs to, you know, people having to leave or a battle with somebody else. Have you found good ways to solve those, still working through those? How have you kind of broken bad habits and also address challenges between teams?
Yeah, I think one of the building blocks is just an accountability system, and we do that through one-on-one. So every team member has a weekly one-on-one with their manager, and so that covers a couple of different things. It's a weekly doc. The interesting thing, the way we do it, is it's not a meeting where you show up and just have a conversation and just see what's going on. Hey, what'd you work on this week? So the report has to do prep work. It's a template. The report has to do prep work for it. He or she will share some updates, some wins, report on any of their KPIs, their pipelines, their OKRs or their goals, and just surface the good and the bad and the statuses. They will also share peer feedback, anything great that they saw in the org, anything bad they had in the org. And so we make it very clear for people to just like, hey, like, there's a section in this doc that is really, really important to us for you to just comment on what's going on and help be the eyes and ears. And then there's another section for feedback, good things for the report from the manager, bad thing, and critical and positive feedback. And it goes both ways. The report gets the comment and the manager gets the comment. And so the report does one draft and shares all of their information. Then the manager reads it before the actual meeting and will leave written comments. And then the report then goes read those comments and answers them. So by the time there's the one-on-one meeting, you've already had like the conversation like once, twice, a third time. And so you're really talking about like the deep, like important issues. And everything that we do is there's a next action for everything. So if there's a problem, like, hey, I woke up late. It's like, okay, like, why did you wake up late? Please propose a solution. It's like, oh, like I forgot to set my alarm. And it's like, okay, cool. Well, just set a weekly alarm so you don't have to remember to set your alarm. And that's like a checkbox. And every week, part of the one-on-one is going through those accountability items and reviewing them and just being accountable to the manager. The manager's not like checking. The report is actually saying like, hey, I actually did all my stuff. Check, 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 check. If not, here's why. And so just having that system of accountability means that you can instill change in people's behavior, because you can be like, okay, cool. We decided to do one thing. Did we do it? If yes, great, we can move on. If not, no. So having that system is really important for scaling things. Now, for example, for DMs, right? This is something that we solve in a number of ways. We have culture principles that are written down. They're like, hey, here's why we don't want you to do work-related DMs in Slack. Reason 1, reason 2, reason 3. During onboarding, we mentioned during the calls. And then we have documentation so that if anyone notices, and we encourage people to not snitch, but to give feedback on people that are doing work DMs, because we care about it. It's a company principle, and we want people to improve and get better at enforcing our company principles. And so that usually gets flagged to a manager. The manager has a conversation. The manager will share that written principle as a reminder. And there's a checkbox like, hey, this week, be thoughtful about your work DMs. And so I think the combination of those written principles that we have defined and we as a group of people agree with and are excited about, and this accountability system with one-on-ones makes it really easy to kind of like track and improve change, right? And typically, you know, everyone on the team is excited to learn and grow and is at the company because they like our culture and they got a teaser about it and are excited to kind of like learn more about it and get immersed in it. So usually it's bad habits that they don't necessarily want to maintain, and they're excited to change. So proactiveness as team members and willingness to grow is also critical here.
That's great. Quite a system you got over there, Paul.
It's like a system of systems, right?
Yeah. It's all processes. Was it tough for you to delegate? Like, you know, being hands off. I know you've been part of companies in the past, so maybe it wasn't as much so, but now that it's kind of your thing, you know, I know you said co-founders, but was it tough for you to kind of let go of some things?
I mean, tell me like the name of one manager that found delegation easy, right? I think it's like, it's hard.
If I delegate a process manual, like that's going to be easy for me.
I mean, but then you have to set up like KPIs and coach them and make sure it's good, and you have to trust. Anyway, it's hard. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I like to help people, and I'm productive and like to get stuff done. So a lot of my feedback in we have performance reviews, like in my last performance review was like, yo, Paul, you should just like let other people do things, you know, like let people struggle, and have their own issues and come up with a solution. And so I think that is something that I've struggled with and that I continue to struggle with. And that's something that a lot of our managers and execs are also struggling with. Like even if you think you're good at delegating, you're probably not delegating enough. Unless you've been coached and just have a really, really good system for it, it's hard to do. And it gets harder and harder because it's one thing to delegate, like, hey, schedule this appointment. Okay, cool. That's done. That's a process. There's a schedule. But like when you were doing it, you weren't just doing the job. You were also thinking about how to improving it. You were understanding business context. You were like, hey, let's use Calendly instead of Google Calendar. And so in order to delegate something like really, really effectively, there's increasing levels of ownership. You need to have like quality control systems. You need to make sure the person is not just equipped to do the job, but equipped to build context over time and skills over time so that they can improve that function as the company grows, right? And it's easy to delegate like a small thing, but now you're delegating like a whole P&L, you know, you're like, hey, like you're in charge of the revenue of this part of the business. And that's obviously harder than delegating like a small process. So I guess it just always gets harder and harder. And I mean, not much to it apart from thinking through like different frameworks of doing it and also having really good trust in people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, besides delegating, learning how to delegate, is there anything that you've learned about yourself as a leader or anything that you've improved upon from a management standpoint besides delegation?
Yeah. I'll think of a couple of things. So I think one thing is there's a principle. It's like the loudest voice in the room. So when you start a company, you're usually pretty experienced about things, and a lot of people are kind of like joining the mission. And it can be really easy to give your opinion all the time. And one thing that I'm always working on and trying to do more and more is give people a chance to speak. Because if we have a problem and there's 8 of us in a room and we suggest something and I'm like, hey, we should really do this, then a lot of the people are gonna be like, oh, like the CEO said this, he's done e-com for a long time, like I can't be more right than him. But sometimes they have more context. And so one of the things that can be helpful is letting new people at the company speak first, giving them a chance and encouraging them to chat, because they're more likely to be biased by your ideas. And so that's been hard for me, because I like to share ideas, I like to participate, and so that's a habit I've been getting a lot better at. And then I think just delegation is not like a one-off thing, like I mentioned. So I think I've gotten like much more thoughtful about it and better at it.
Gotcha. Paul, what did you do before this company? I know you said you lived in Silicon Valley, San Francisco. Can you give us a little background on like what led up to this?
Yeah. So I'm actually French. I was born in Paris, and my dad worked and still works for IBM. So we were expatriated. So I spent 6 years in France, 3 years in London, 3 years in New York, and kind of got all mixed up. Then I went to college at Stanford University. I studied computer science, studied systems. So I was always excited about building products and things, but systems was exciting for me, because I was like, hey, if I'm going to learn computer science, let me just go learn the hard stuff. During school, I really just got sick of classes, and I was just working on like projects, did a lot of extracurricular stuff. That's where I met Jeff. Spent a lot of time in crypto. It was like 2014. So I built mining rigs and imported like graphic cards from France, because it was like duty free and way cheaper, and couldn't live in my own room because it was too hot from all the crypto mining and stuff. So spent some time on crypto projects as I graduated. And then I spent a little bit of time across like different projects, helping friends with this and that. And really my first job was at a company called NutriBox, which renamed to HVMN, the company that I'm proud of being a part of, and that's doing really good right now, Health via Modern Nutrition. I spent about 4.5, 5 years there. I started off as an engineer, and we were all engineers. We were building this CPG company, and we were excited about building personalized nootropics and thinking that we could just engineer like the best consumer company for nootropics and human performance. And I think we slowly learned, like all of us, that we had to learn about marketing and like product development for CPG and finance and all of the stuff that like they don't teach you in computer science school, but are super valuable to building consumer products. And that led to kind of like a lot of learning and change. And so through that, kind of like learned about, my role was engineering and e-commerce and digital marketing. So I learned how to find and recruit engineers, and started to learn about building a team there. I learned about e-commerce. We actually like built our own platform before moving over to Shopify. So a lot of experience with high freedom, but hard to change, hard to move quickly. Moving over to Shopify, being kind of like locked into this fast moving, but locked in restrictive ecosystem. And I think that led to a lot of the ideas and insights for Archive. But yeah, really that was it. Just learned a lot about e-commerce and digital marketing through that experience. And I think just always trying to reach out to people and agency owners and other brand owners to be like, hey, like this is not working for us. Like, how do we do it? And then, learning from that perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good path. Yeah. Sounds like you were very busy in college, busy in a good way.
Yeah. I mean, I was like so busy, but like just did nothing in class. Like I would just like that's
the way to do it though, honestly. Yeah. I mean, you were learning real life skills, real life stuff.
I mean, I think there's two ways to do it. Either you go full on the educational path and really just take the educational journey, which is cool and fine and awesome. Like I know some people that build really good skills and networks working with professors and learning really a lot more computer science than me around like database and things like that. And they're off to like great places. I was just like, yo, I'm just going to basically do as little work as possible. And yeah.
I'd say it worked out pretty well for you.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, it worked all right.
So far, so good. I definitely got caught in the academic of like, you graduate, you go to college and then it was after like that first job out of college, I'm like, oh man, fuck that system. Like that's not it. Where I wish I would have spent more time in college figuring out things like you did, the offhand stuff, because man, I got this one friend. He's like, oh yeah, I'm going to go get my master's. I'm like, for what? Like, start a business. You'll get more experience starting a business, probably a hell of a lot cheaper. I think the cost of education is a real challenge. Like I have some friends that left masters or things like that with
a ton of debt, and that's tough. That just puts a lot of restrictions on your life for potentially like 10 years. So I think that's like a really tough part. And it's hard for a kid to get that, right? Like if you don't have debt after college, you have a job, you save some money, you can have some investments, you can think about this and that. But if you got to pay back, like, I don't know how many thousands of dollars a year or a month, it's hard to start a business. It's hard to have freedom. It's hard to just think about going on vacation and buying like an Arduino and doing some stuff, because you're like, no, I gotta like put it in the. So yeah, I think that's tough.
Yeah. And it's like you pay X amount and then you come out and you're not even worth a quarter of that to anybody.
Yeah. So that's interesting. It's like, well, what do you pay for? So, I went to I think part of the value of the school I went to is the stamp and the credential, right? I think there's like valuable networking and community. I think in terms of the classes, it's like, I do not think there's like a massive difference between curriculums at Stanford potentially and some other schools that are not as kind of like fancy. But I think the network was really valuable, and also the stamp and the credibility that this gets you. And that's something that I try not to. There's a lot of things in the world and biases in the world that you do not agree with, but as an operator, you want to take advantage of them, right? It's like, I don't like judge people by which school they went to. And we've hired people not even asking like what school they went to, but like we'll for sure flex on our, Stanford creds when we need to leverage that social proof, right?
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, you're making a point with leverage. I know that's kind of a topic we were going to touch on today too. In your business, how do you use leverage with your marketing, your influencers, and how does that relationship work?
Yeah, I'm curious. Do you want maybe clarify the question a little bit more? Because what do you mean exactly by, because you specifically
I guess
influencers, right?
Yeah, sorry. So like when you have newer influencers leveraging your position with their position to really, I guess, get the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Where it's good for both of you guys in terms of the deal, I guess.
Yeah. So that's interesting. That's a good question. In the way we run it is, when we work with influencers, we represent the brand. And so we'll say like, if Paul is reaching out to influencers, and we're checking smaller influencers, right? Typically between like 5 to 25,000 followers. So it's usually not a big deal or something. Okay. And, we're on behalf of the brand. And I think the leverage that we have is we try to be friends and approachable and super casual. And you wouldn't necessarily think about it as leverage, and we typically don't, but I have friends that have millions of followers, and I see them doing free things, and I see them charging $50,000 for worse versions of those free things that give away. So with influencers, there is such a huge spread of value you can get from every influencer. So you got to, like, as you mentioned, like capture that leverage. And the way we've done it with nano influencers is to be really friendly, super open, and be like, hey, like, I like your content. We have cool products. Here's why you'd like them. You want to just try them. No commitment. Super, super chill. And we actually find better performance doing that and starting off that way than like, hey, saw your content, want to try this. It's worth $50. We want a story post in exchange. And that's just locks people in. When people try the product, they're like, okay, cool. Like, no commitment. Sure, I'll take this free stuff. And if they like it, they'll post it. If they don't like it, do you even want them to post? Not really, right? It just puts people in a weird spot. So just building relationships and doing so in a very kind of awesome, friendly way is really what we try to shoot for. And one of the special things about our programs is that we can really work with 1,000 influencers and have them have a real authentic relationship with the brand, feeling like they can get hooked up by a homie at the company in a scalable way. And that's hard to do. And that's what influencers want. They just want to feel like they're special. How do we do that? Responding really, really quickly and in a really not canned way,
Yeah. So do you guys have a lot of like cold DM email approaches?
Yeah.
And how does, because I hear a lot of marketers go back and forth. Like, you should do it, you shouldn't do it. You have the Gary V's of like, hey, reach out to 100 people a day, or, spend a few hours and just, hey, can you try this? Can I send you this? What's kind of your guys' approach, and what's really worked in terms of just shooting a cold DM? Because I've gotten them where I'm like, it's so off-putting, I want to throw up, right? But how have you guys kind of mastered that approach?
Yeah. So I think it just depends what you're offering too. Like, if you're cold DMing someone to do something like I mean, if it's super transactional, if it's not good value for them, it's going to be like an annoying, like maybe not good experience. Sometimes you got to take that rejection though, right? Like sometimes you're just starting up, you got to do it and it's okay. But with us, we work with awesome companies and we're like, hey, do you want like some really delicious like keto cereal that everyone's like raving about? Or do you want, and so they're like, oh my God, this is great. Like, sure, why not? If we were like, hey, here's an offer, here's a post, here's what you got to do, it would probably be a lot more tedious and we'd not get as good results because people are like, no, like I just pay me. You want all these specific things, like pay me. We're just like, yo, just try the product. And we start from that perspective. In terms of like what works, if you're starting out and you're a small business and trying to ramp up influencer marketing, here's what you should do. You should reach out to influencers on Instagram and you should DM them. And then you should comment on their feed post and say, hey, I DM'd you, check it out. And maybe like a couple things, give them a little bit of support. That's what you will get the highest response rates for. Now, is that what we do? No, because we're working with thousands of influencers and we'd get rate limited by Instagram and all that stuff. And you can't really manage IG DMs in a sophisticated way. So we do it all through email. So we will cold email influencers and have conversation through email. And brands really like that because they can still do customer support and things like that in IG DMs. We get still really, really good reply rates and things like that because we've built good infrastructure and have a good playbook for that. But if you're starting out, an easy thing to do is just DM people on Instagram and comment. Like you'll double your response rate if you leave a comment on one of their posts. Again, depends how big they are. If you're talking about 50,000 or less followers, which again, if you're starting out, would really recommend working with smaller people to build those relationships. They'll notice.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And it's like, yeah, like same thing for like VCs, right? It's like, cool. If you have someone that can intro you or you've worked with a VC or someone there, it's like, take that, right? But it's like, are you really going to say, I'm not going to do sales. I'm not going to work with influencers. I'm not going to raise money because I can't get a warm intro. It's like, no, like do that. And then do whatever you can to get closer to warm intros. If you feel like that's possible, do some networking, like find out what works. But people have made a ton of money and gotten a ton of results with cold outreach. And you just have to gotta thread the needle, right? Like don't be too spammy. Don't be like sending like 50 emails. but then again, it works. Like, I don't know, like, that actually works. Like account-based marketing, you get some SaaS companies that will send you like drip sequences of so many emails, say top of mind, and it works. And then you sign up. Sometimes they even like call you. And I'm like, yo, like, don't call me, bro. Just email me. But
put me on your blacklist, please.
Yeah.
Paul, have you, I'm interested about the competitive landscape for your company. Has your company identified like any like prime competitors that are doing the same thing as you? What's that look like right now?
Yeah, I mean, with archive communities, I think we have two types of competitors, maybe three types of competitors, right? So one of them is traditional influencer marketing agencies, like these cool, hypey, New York-based, LA-based agencies that have a lot of relationships, know all the influencers. They will be better than us at working and closing brand deals with 1 million influencers. We don't even do that. And so we're very different because we can have the same kind of like care and attention to that relationship times 1,000, but only on smaller influencers. Another competitor is going to be like an influencer platform. So every week there's a new influencer platform with like this database, that database, and people post stuff, they put an offer, and then that gets blasted to a set of influencers, and the influencer gets $50 for this post or whatever. And you can get results quickly, but it will not be as authentic. And you also don't control the relationship. With our product, Archive Communities, we will find and build relationships for your brand. So if you fire us after 6 months, thankfully it doesn't happen that often, like we have good retention, we'll give you all the relationships back. We can do email intros. We can give you the email accounts. So kind of like SEO, when you're working with Archive Communities, you get to own those relationships over time. And that's really valuable. That's what we want to do. We want to work with companies that work with us for 2 years, 3 years. And after like a year, 2 years, they have like 1,500 influencers that are really excited about the company that we can activate to echo boom this really cool product launch and have those relationships. Whereas if you're working with a network, it's going to cost you the same amount of money every single time. There's no kind of like compounding games. If you remove the credit card, you lose all your value. And then the other thing is platforms. So there's companies, influencer marketing platforms that are self-service. So they have search features that let you find influencers. They have this conversational thing so you can contact influencers and message them. And then they have like this campaign management stuff so you can upload content, give briefs and stuff. So that's cool if you have someone full-time that is going to manage those relationships. But typically brands have to hire people, train them to use the software and pay for the expensive software. And so again, I'm not saying those companies are bad, but we serve a very different purpose. And I don't think there's a lot of companies out there that can authentically build relationships with, 500 or 1,000 influencers for a brand and have influencers actually feel like they're talking to a human at the brand and have an awesome relationship.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a good analysis. So like your software, from your perspective, like how unique is it? Is this something that, can you patent this? Is this something that you would license? Is this something that you would eventually sell? Like how will that work for you going forward?
Yeah, so we have a lot of agencies that want to white label our software. Just from our perspective, like demand has been really good and we are happy to focus on internal software for archive communities because we don't have to polish it and make it like adaptable. And that lets us move really quickly and create greater value for those communities. So we're really happy with that. I think that there's a world maybe in a year, 2 years, where we've built so much and have expanded our community significantly that we will be able to bring on people as self-service customers on our platform. But that's not really like a priority. Like I'd rather build in like TikTok or better performance metrics and better tracking than like making it easy for us to reset passwords and do customer support, right? So it just depends on the value. Like what problem are we trying to solve with archive communities? We are working with brands that already work with maybe 100 or 200 influencers and that want to get to 1,000. What is the quickest way and best way to do that? It's not to give them some software. It's to have this managed software type relationship where we build software for us that they, kind of like license through us, but we're really running it for them because that's what's working best. And will change over time, right?
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And then and a good example of that is Archive app, right? We took 25% of our software that we were like, every brand should just use this, no brainer. Like, why would you want your stories to disappear? Like if you want a story that was posted a year ago, you can't do it. 6 months ago, you can't do it. So that was very clear that a lot of brands could and should use this. And we set up a separate team to manage that product and spin that out as a separate standalone product. And it's doing really well. But again, it's like more strategic and thoughtful than like, hey, let's just take our whole software and let anyone use it. Is like, hey, there's a specific technology we can reuse. Let's also have a self-serve app that leverages that back end.
That's awesome. So Paul, I know you're more on software side, but what kind of pitfalls do you see with companies who may rely on influencers a little too much? Like, have you seen the consequence of that, where a company might only be on influencers? Because I feel like I see a lot of companies on social media where their game is just influencer. Do you see that work more? Am I kind of misguided there?
That's interesting. I would say that it's not common for a company to be like, influencers working so well for us and nothing else is working. Usually it's Facebook or search, and they have a tough time spinning up other channels. So it's very, very common that a company's like, yo, 90% of my spend is going through Facebook. And now that this happened on Facebook, our whole company metrics just changed because we're so reliant on Facebook. So that is very common. That is very standard. Working too well on influencers is not as usual and common. And with influencers, you can spin things off like really easily, right? So if you have a community of influencers you're working with, you can use that content for Facebook ads. You have fuel for your email. You can take those awesome photos and videos and create them into stories for email and SMS. You can put those influencers on your website. You can do whitelisting, which is when you take over an influencer's Instagram or Facebook account and run ads for your brand using their account. So it's a little bit different than seeing an ad from a brand. You can do affiliates. And so there's so many ways to differentiate that. I haven't really seen that case. Usually what happens with influencers is brands like try it and maybe don't try it well or doesn't perform well for them for some reason. Maybe they're measuring it wrong and they give up on it. But I do not know of any brand that's like, yo, we're just doing influencers so well and it's crushing so much and then it stopped working. Because typically if you do influencers well, it'll compound, right? I think other things can happen when you have one channel, like maybe competitors enter and things like that, and ensure that becomes more just hard for brands, and brands do die for different reasons, but I encourage all brands to differentiate their marketing after they've had one really good channel. But I don't think it's not a common, e-commerce like paradigm.
Cool. Tim, any other questions? I want to be cognizant of your time too, Paul. I know you're on retreat and things like that.
No. So our retreat is in Turkey. I'm from France. My family's in France. So I'm actually working, I'm in my family's apartment. And so just seeing my family catching up.
Cool.
It's really hard to, see European families with COVID. So glad to get a little bit of family time.
Well, I do want to respect your family time. Tim, any other questions for Paul?
Yeah, I really enjoy this interview. I think I asked everything I want to ask.
Yeah, this has been super sweet. Paul, so we always end with one, like our kind of last question for everyone, but anything else that you want to hit on? And then also, plug your socials where people can find you, things like that. But anything else that we didn't cover? Any last words that you want to make sure our audience hears?
I think this was great. This was fun. I think really liked how diverse we went, talking about different things. It was a really fun conversation. In terms of Archive, check us out on archive.ai. We have information on our 2 products, Archive Communities. If you're looking to scale a community of influencers to help with sales, brand awareness, different content goals. And if you're a Shopify company and have anyone tagging in your stories, then go to archive.ai and check out Archive app. In one click, you can install the app. A couple of clicks, you can install the app, and it'll automatically save and label your content, which can be really, really valuable for the future. You can also check me out on Twitter. It's just my last name, at BENIGERI. And if you guys have any questions around influencer marketing, around our products, reach out on Twitter, reach out to me via email. You'll see a contact form on the website. Really happy to help brands, especially if you're starting out and you're not really sure how to approach influencer marketing. I can point you in the right direction. More than happy to help.
Awesome. And we'll tag all your info and stuff in our episode show notes. And I don't think I said, we'll probably release this, 3 weeks, probably in the next 3 weeks. And what Tim and I will do, we'll intro the episode, put it together. We'll send it to you for just final approval, make sure that everything's how you want it to sound. And then, so we'll release that. But our last question we always like to ask people is how that they want to be remembered. So when it's all said and done, Paul, how do you want people to remember you?
I don't really care, honestly.
I don't think we ever had that answer.
That's the first. I like it.
I'm going to be dead, right? So I guess I'm not too worried about my legacy. It is what it is. I think I just care more about, the journey and where things go on. So I think it's a combination of, I think just enjoying the journey is important, right? And so that's what I typically try to focus on. I think one of the things that's been really awesome is, how do the team members you work with around you not remember you, but feel about working with you, right? And so I feel like that's something that I try to optimize for and think about a lot more.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's perfect.
Fair enough, man.
I love it.
Well, Paul, this is a lot of fun, man. I know we really appreciate your time. People are going to get a ton of value out of this. So I'm excited for this one to launch. But thanks for taking some family time and giving us a little bit of it. And enjoy your stay, man.
Of course. Hey, it was great talking. Really, really fun conversation and appreciate you guys.
Good deal.
Take care.
All right, man. We'll see you later.
See ya.